Hi, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Novelists Unwind. I'm so glad you're here with us. My special guest today is Cynthia Roemer. Cynthia is an award-winning author. Has written for many years short stories and articles, and now she has historical novels published. And we're glad to be here today to talk to her about those. Cynthia, welcome. So glad to have you with us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Oh, thank you. So we're going to be talking today, first of all, about your Prairie Sky series. They take place in the 1800s, and I've read one of your books. I read Under the Same Sky. Just really enjoyed it. Do all of your books take place in Illinois?
Yes. Like that one, some of it was in Missouri as well as Illinois, but the base, yes, is the Illinois Prairie. I just finished my third one. And some of it takes place in Cincinnati, Ohio, but so I kind of have two sides to some of my stories. So, yeah, but the base is Illinois, which is where I'm from. So,
yeah, it's pretty cool to write from where you're from because you just know it.
Right.
You know it so well. Well, show us. I know you've got copies of two of your books. Show us the first book in the Prairie series, the Prairie Sky series.
It's Under the Same Sky.
And that's the one I read. It was really, really a very sweet story. And what's the other one?
The other is Under Prairie Skies, and it's Charlotte. You meet Charlotte in the first story.
Oh,
she's the heroine in the second story.
Oh, how cool. Okay, well, that's really cool.
The third story is her sister Esther's story, so it's all kind of in the family there.
Well, that really is nice to have them connected like that. So now the first story, Under the Same Sky, the heroine in it is Becky Hollister, and I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I was really interested. So one of the characters and you can share how much you want, but is injured and blind, is becoming blind. And so that's when you move the story to St. Louis, to Missouri, and to a blind school there. And I was just so struck when I was reading how, the research you must have done in that, because it was so real. I mean, I just felt like it was very grounded. So can you talk about that? Was that a real place, or a place you made up based on a real place? How did you handle that part of the story?
Yes, I did do quite a bit of research. Like you said, I actually wrote a rough draft of this Under the Same Sky when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was a dream for a long time. I was able to do, before I graduated, I had to do 300 hours of related work to my major. And so I petitioned them to ask if, instead of doing a job somewhere, English related, if I could research and write a novel. And they allowed it. So I spent 300 hours researching and writing back then. But then I realized, I kind of had my family, and I got married and job and everything, and let it sit. I'm getting off a little bit, but
that's fine.
But it sat for like 20 years before, and in 2012 I got connected up with American Christian Fiction Writers Group, and I realized my writing, wow, it was totally different from 20 years, a lot changes. And the Christian market, I knew I'd have to totally revamp everything. And so I revamped my writing, and I also had to do more research because my story actually changed some. The blind school, it was an actual place in St. Louis. And so I had to look up picture, and it changed. I mean, they had different buildings and stuff. And so it was kind of hard to track down where it was, what it looked like at the time the novel took place. But yeah, I really enjoyed the research. And one of the instructors was actually based on the actual person who founded the school. So
yeah, That's really cool when you can do something like that. I think it's amazing. So your degree is it in English with creative writing or in creative
Right.
writing?
Yeah, yeah. It's basically English, but I like to call it creative writing because, when you say English, people think of grammar and all that stuff. And really, it was creative writing.
Wow.
So.
That's amazing to spend, I mean, like 300 hours and then to have the story and just sort of tuck it away for all this time. But I mean, that happens to us. I'm working again on a story that I started in 2007, maybe something like that. And it got, same thing. It kind of got put away, and then you bring it back out and you try to, figure out what you're going to do with it. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I wrote like you said, the Christian short stories and
Yes.
and articles, and had those published throughout. I had time for the short stuff, but not for the long. So.
Not for the long ones. Well, that is really cool. What kind of short stories do you write?
Well, I don't do a lot of that anymore since I've gotten into novel writing, but just Christian based. A lot of for teen magazines and Christian weekly take-home papers, and
Oh, wow.
had a few, I think 2 or 3 in Brio with Focus on the Family.
Right.
And,
Well, good for you.
and then I can't remember, there was one of the larger magazines for Christian couples. I can't remember what it's called right now. So.
Well, that's really great. So you just were able, through raising kids and all of that, to continue writing. And now I think that happens for a lot of us. Like, we have this dream of writing, but when we're raising families and working and all of that, it's hard to put in the time until the kids kind of grow up. And you have 2 sons, is that right? That are.
Yeah, I have one. Well, they both just finished college. One's 22 and one that's 20. They're both working full time now. Still living at home, but
That's okay.
yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm not ready to kick them out yet. So.
Well, that's good. That's good. So you live on a farm in Illinois. You've lived there most of your married life, or what's your story?
Yeah, I've been married to a farmer for 25 years. We've celebrated our 25th anniversary. And before that, I lived on a hobby farm. My mom and dad had about every kind of animal you could imagine. So it was kind of weird switching over to grain farmer because, we have dog and cat, but I could never talk my husband into, he got burnt out on milking cows before school growing up and all the taking care of animals. So I haven't been able to talk him into chickens but we did raise a couple of wild turkeys, which was fun.
Oh, wow.
We found some turkey eggs along the road and we hatched them. And so we had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Wow, that's great that they hatched, if they had been kind of left out.
The first batch, only 2 lived. We found out that you had to, they wouldn't take to the chicken feed. We had to get them bugs. So I had my boys and me out scouring for bugs to keep them alive. So
what an adventure, though. Wow, I lived on a hobby farm with my sister for a short time, for about 3 years, and we had guineas, and I don't know how many we started out with, but I don't know, and I don't know what happened, but there were only like 3 that really survived to adulthood, and unfortunately there were foxes, and so eventually we did lose all the guineas. But it was kind of an interesting time. I'm sorry.
I said there's lots of critters around trying to get that's another reason not to have them around here. So.
Yeah, we did have some experiences which I won't talk about. I tell you, farming, especially with animals, it is not for the faint of heart. I will just tell you that. It toughens you up in ways you may not want to be toughened up.
That's true.
Well, what other kind? Okay, so I'm going back to your stories, the Prairie Sky series. So in the first one, again, we have Becky Hollister, and there is this element of the blind and in working with that, and Becky's involved with that too, as she sort of learns to trust God after facing tragedy and trying to figure out God's will for her life. And then Becky's cousins are Charlotte and Esther. Now, I will say that in the first book, Charlotte does not come off very well. So kudos to you then for making her the heroine of the second book. So how do you sort of redeem a character that's not nice in the first book and make them likable in the second book?
Oh, lots of prayer. Yeah, God really does a work on her heart in the second novel, and I grew to really love her character. She's strong-natured, and you don't like, I've had people say, I don't like her at the beginning, but there's a huge turnaround, and by the end, hopefully readers really grow to love her, because she does get tenderized. And in fact, the main thrust of the second book is as iron sharpens iron. That's the main verse. Yeah. So one person sharpens another, and that's what it's all about. It's about Chad Avery is the hero, and Charlotte Stanton, how God uses them to speak into each other's lives, because Chad has a painful past that he is having trouble moving past, and Charlotte helps him do that, and he helps Charlotte see the ugliness inside her, and it hurts, but it's the beginning of a healing process and a changing process in her, and it's how God uses them to not only draw that out, but draw each other closer to God as well. So all my books have a really strong spiritual message.
Yeah.
The first book maybe have more scripture, and deals with the inner relationship Becky has with God, her relationship with God, whereas the second one is more how they help each other grow. So,
well, that's really interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that too, and it was really cool, especially, and I hate to give spoilers, and this did come kind of late in the book, but I really loved the theme that you had about laying our Isaac down, and like, what is the Isaac in our lives that we want so much that we have a hard time giving that up to God, and I thought that was a really, I loved that whole part, especially that theme that kind of ran through the end of the book. So yeah,
that was definitely a God thing. God, that wasn't part of the story for a long time, and I just felt like God gave me that idea.
cool.
So that, I think that's what makes a book special, is when you can tell it's from God, you know.
And that whole creative writing process, I mean, it is just so interesting anyway, because it's like you said, it's like the things that come as you're writing that you don't even expect, and God just kind of gives you, and you think, oh, well, yeah, I mean, that is so perfect. But, it comes at the right time, and sometimes we have to wait on that. So that's really neat. Well, besides your writing, I looked up on your website. Know you have some other hobbies too. You like to walk, you do four-wheeling, biking, gardening, reading. So what do you like best? What's your favorite thing to do when you're not writing?
Well, I don't know if I have one thing I like best, but just being with my family. I love riding in the combine with my husband in the fall. I love fall. That's my favorite time of year. So I just love walking. We've got a loop that I call it, that we walk usually twice a day, probably a mile and a quarter.
Oh, good.
Through the timber, we moved over to where we're at now about 10 years ago, and we crossed two creeks, and one, there really wasn't a good way to cross. And I said, boys, I'd love for you to build a bridge across that creek. And they thought I was goofy at first, but they did it. And it's so nice to have a little bridge across the one creek. And then then they cut a path through the trees so we could have the loop, so we didn't have to walk back and forth the same route. So we go all the way around back to our house. So.
Oh, I like that. That sounds so idyllic. It's just like I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and so it's just like I haven't lived on a farm for a long time, and it's really it always just touches my heart, It still does. I don't necessarily want to do that again, but there's that, just like, oh, that longing will never go away, I guess. But,
and gardening, I'm in the middle of making pickles and
wow.
And I make sweet pickles and pickle relish, and we've got the tomatoes and
yeah,
sweet corn. That's my favorite, and watermelon. We're waiting on it, so it probably won't be ready till it gets cool. We got it planted late, so
wow.
That's my husband's favorite. So,
Oh, that does sound wonderful.
Well, when we ride motorcycles now, my son's gotten a motorcycle, so my husband had ridden a motorcycle when he was young and then traded it for the four-wheeler because he could use that more on the farm. Well, then now he got the bug again to get the motorcycle, so we're off motorcycling on the weekends. So.
You're busy. You are so busy. Wow. Another interesting thing, you were without internet for 2 weeks.
Yes, that was terrible.
How do you survive without internet for 2 weeks?
Well, I'll tell you what I did. After I decided it wasn't going to come back on, I had checked out some books for my next idea for a novel, my fourth novel. Because my third one's coming out in September.
Right.
And
right.
the fourth one is not going to be in the series. It's going to be probably a standalone novel, and I have a lot of research to do with for it because it's going to be Civil War era and post-Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did, I started reading books and making notes, and I started research, and I actually wrote the first scene pretty much of the novel. So I got to start on it so I could still write at least.
Yeah.
I did miss my writing friends. Out here in the country, out here in no man's land, really, there aren't any other Christian novel writers, and no groups in the area. I have to go clear to Chicago or way down south to even get in a Christian writers group. So I really missed my writing community.
Yeah,
my friends.
I can definitely relate to that. That would be one of the hard things about being without internet for a while. Wow. So your third book, to kind of go back to it, because we haven't talked about it very much at all, Under Moonlit Skies, comes out in September, and the heroine in it is Esther, who is also Becky's cousin, Charlotte's sister. So Becky's from the first book. Her cousins are Charlotte and Esther. And Esther is just a sweetheart in the first book. So that's kind of exciting then also to revisit her. But how do you keep a character like that from being too good? So we go from Charlotte, who needs to be a little bit, softened up, and then Esther, who's just such a sweetie. What kind of conflicts do you give Esther to keep her interesting?
Well, her main problem is she's too pliable. She lets her mom rule her and make her decisions for her. So I don't know how much to give away, but
no, I only want you to give away what
okay.
you're comfortable giving away. So yeah, don't do spoilers you don't want to do.
She has to find her voice and the person she is. So.
Yeah. She has to find her voice. That's good. Good. And who's the hero of that story?
The hero you actually meet in book 2. Chad Avery goes on a cattle drive, and he meets a young cattle drover named Stuart Brandt, which if you remember Jimmy from the first book, Jimmy, her best friend Jimmy, and this is Stuart, or Stu. He goes by Stu to his friends. But I got the Jimmy and the Stuart because I love Jimmy Stewart. and Stu is tall and lank like Jimmy Stewart and has a personality that is just so I just love, I kind of, you know, put Jimmy Stewart in him a lot, but he doesn't look like Jimmy Stewart other than he's tall and lank, but he's got wavy brown hair. But he's so lovable. But yeah, he's the hero. He happens by and a visit to Chad's house, and that's where it starts. So.
That's so interesting because it does come out to just a whole different thing about coming up with characters' names. And so, I mean, when you write, a lot of books, it can be hard to keep even track of what names you've already used and And, just that whole search for a character's name. And I've kind of done that too. I have I like the show Leverage that was on, a few years back. And one of the characters was Elliot Spencer. So I have a minor character in one of my books named Spencer Elliot. You just are always trying to, and I had probably recently watched an episode of that, right before I was trying to come up with a name. So it was on my mind. So yeah, just, it's always fun to see how writers decide on, sometimes they just come to you, you just say,
right.
Oh, that is the perfect name for this character. And other times it can be hard. I'm working on a blurb right now and named my heroine. So it's for a proposal. It's not for a store. I mean, it's not sold yet or anything. So named the heroine for a woman who opened her home in World War I to shell-shocked soldiers, and I just felt like this story could honor her in that way. So I named my heroine for her. So, it's just, just it's just fun to see how.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Cynthia, this has been really fun. I just congratulate you on your writing journey. Also should mention you've mentioned being a member of American Christian Fiction Writers, which is a great organization. And of course, they have the Genesis contest every year, and you've been a finalist and a semi-finalist, and that is a very big deal in the inspirational writing world. So congrats on that. Plus, you won some other contests and awards. So congrats on all of those. Really cool. And show us your books again. So Under the Same Sky and Under Prairie Skies. If you can show both of those beautiful, beautiful covers. And then the next book, the third book, comes out again, like we said, in September. I don't suppose you have the cover to that one yet.
No, I don't. They can find it online. I just did it. There's a book trailer for it.
Great.
That I just put out. So hopefully some, on one of the groups, if they're on Facebook, it's look for it around some of the Christian Facebook groups. So.
All right. And also, like almost every author that I interview has a newsletter. So I know Cynthia has a monthly newsletter. So if you're wanting, to get up-to-date news, you can always subscribe to that too. And that's a good way to stay in touch with what's going on, what Cynthia has coming out. Again, I just really enjoyed the story. The one I read, Under the Same Sky, is really just very sweet, very tender, and very inspiring. I love that your little tagline is sowing seeds of hope into hearts of readers, and from someone who's been involved in farming, all of her life. I think that's just so appropriate and speaks to who you are as a person and as a writer. So,
Thank you.
So good to have you here. Thank you for being my guest. I have one last question I ask everybody who comes on. When you get to the end of the story, you type the end, what do you do to unwind?
Oh, I get outside. I get outside. I spend so much time at the computer, and it's just nice to get out and breathe the fresh air and do something that I enjoy doing. I love working in flower beds and going places, going out to eat ice cream with my family, or going on a bike ride or something like that. Just something I enjoy. So.
Oh, that's fun. That sounds fun. Well, thanks again for being my guest. And for those of you watching, thanks for doing so. And be sure to check back again for more episodes of Novelists Unwind. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.